What's up, everybody, and welcome here to another episode here on The Remedy. I am delighted to be with you once again. I just want to let you know, if you're not sure, if you don't know that already, that there is a battle going on in your mind, and it's a battle of ideals. It's a battle of values. It's a battle of perspectives. It's a battle of culture. We are all in this war, and it's happening in our mind every day. And there are people that you may even consider friends, that people that you may even consider that you think highly of, like your professors and psychologists and teachers and pastors and doctors and world leaders, and or this group or that group. They are all involved in this battle for your mind, and they are not interested in your individuality. They're not interested in your ability to think and reason. They don't want to teach you how to discern truth from fantasy. No, they are all fighting to have access to your mind so that they can indoctrinate you. They want to program you with their views, with their methods, with their beliefs. And this is why here at The Remedy, we don't want to tell you what to think. In fact, it's the opposite. We want to challenge you to rethink what you think, to ask questions, to question everything, even your belief in God, to learn how to discern truth from fiction. More importantly, here at The Remedy, we don't just want you to have a cognitive knowledge, just knowing the facts. But we also want you to have an experience with God, an experience that will challenge you to question who you are, your character, your heart's desire, and that our lives is nothing but just a vapor. We can just preach the gospel, but we must be the gospel in all that we do. And that include loving people who are different than us. That include having grace, compassion, along with the truth. So, with that being said, I want to welcome you to. So, with this, I want to take a moment now to bring the member of the crew are here with me today. Guys, welcome to our show. Thank you so much for being here once again. How you guys doing today?
Good.
Good.
Listen, everybody's looking all beautiful. I mean, look at you guys. This is a Kodak moment right there. Ready? Smile. There we go.
I'm still stuck on the blue muscle shirt. I'm sorry.
The what?
The blue
Oh,
muscle shirt.
Well, I've been working out. I
I
have a
see.
couple of CDs and DVDs that I no longer use, so I use them on a regular basis.
is
You
that
know.
a
I thought
moment?
you were gonna say you got to work out from Coach Kells, but okay.
I mean, that would have been a nice plug, but we'll talk about
Well,
this.
I tried Coach Kells before. I mean, we had one workout, and I was like, I'm out. It was at the beginning when coronavirus first started. I mean, it was everybody was at home, and we put the phone down on the floor, and everybody can see what everybody's doing. I had one workout. I was like, okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm done.
Oh,
I
Maybe
try, I
you
try
should
to
have
get
a
him,
video class.
I try to get him to come back. He was not answering my
It
calls. He
wasn't.
was trying
What,
to-
what happened was
His
yeah,
phone got the Rona.
busy.
His phone
yeah.
had the Rona.
So, guys, I'm glad you're here today. So we're going to talk about how should I put this? There are some Bible questions or topics that most people don't want to be bothered with, because those are some very hard questions um, that we're trying to understand. What is God trying to say in this particular chapter, or in this particular book, or in this particular passage? And sometimes it changed from one person to another. One thing I have to say though, and you guys can tell me if you agree with me on that, that people have misquote the Bible for like it's crazy. Okay, like if you want to do something and you want to justify it, you can probably find a scripture in the Bible, okay, to say there it is. God told me I can do it. It's right here in writing. I mean, do you guys agree with me on this?
Yes.
Right?
Mhm.
Yeah, there's even ones that they make up.
There you
Right.
go. like God help those who help themselves, right? That's one of them.
Or
That's exactly what I'm thinking about.
this guy one time told me, you know, in the Bible, like in the Bible, it says God's best babies and fools. And I was like, what
What?
chapter is that? Like, what? And he was like, no, it's in the Bible. I was like, no, it's not. Like,
The funniest Bible quoters are the ones that'll tell you a whole scripture, and you be like, "What verse is that?" And they be like, "Oh, I'm not. I don't remember what book it is, but I know it's in
right.
the."
Right.
Sure, thanks for that.
You're like, oh, I remember somebody else told me that the movie 300 is a Bible story. And I was like, what? And he was like, and he was like, yeah, I'm a chaplain. I was like, yo, what church do you go to if you're a chaplain?
My
Yeah,
I
favorite
want to hear those
one.
sermons.
I'm never going to that spot. Never.
My favorite one is the water into wine thing and telling us that Jesus made grape juice and that it wasn't alcoholic. And that's the one. I'm like, well, where in the Bible did it say that it wasn't fermented? It said wine. It didn't say grape juice.
Oh, see, but you got to think, you got to philosophize the times where, the Lord wasn't like that, so he was like changing the wine, but the wine wasn't the same wine as today's wine.
It
Exactly.
was
That's what they
Welch's.
You got to
say.
open your mind. You got to
It
read
was
between
Welch's.
the lines,
Well, not only you have to read between the lines, sometimes they say, well, it's biblical.
Right, right.
So, like, what does that mean when you say it's biblical? Because again, there's so many things that are in the Bible, but Jesus himself will come and say, you have heard, but I say. So, depending if you believe in the Old Testament or New Testament, you can pick and choose. I think that's the thing. Sometimes we treat the Bible like it's democracy, that we can pick and choose what we want and when we want, so that we can do what we want when we want, if I'm making sense, right?
Yeah.
So let me throw this your way. Let me start with this. Let's the first question I have for you. How many of you believe in miracles? Let me see your hands. All right, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 of you do not believe in miracles. Good. By the way, Lois is with us today. He's on the road, he's driving, so he's gonna keep his eyes on the road, but he's listening to the show as well. Okay. Welcome, Lois.
Multitasking. Lewis,
Yeah.
I have a question today. Will you
Thank
still
you. Thank
keep it
you.
under 30 seconds because you're on the road?
Actually, this is a topic where I expect to be quite verbose.
Oh, okay.
So, all right. So let's go back to the original questions. So, miracles, guys. We have read them in the Bible. Even when you were, a kid growing up, you read miracles. You read about Moses and the Red Sea. You read about Jesus healing and this and that. And you read even the apostles; they were able to perform some miracles. As we move away more and more and more and more from the Bible, from Bible time, it seems that miracles are no longer with us. Is that an accurate statement, or are miracles something from the past, or is it we don't necessarily experience miracles today because we don't have enough faith? Sometimes that's what I hear. If you have faith, then you ask God whatever you ask God, He will give it to you. So, your thoughts?
Lewis.
Am I supposed to go first?
No, can you put
No,
it in mute if you're not gonna?
real fast
Oh,
on mute.
sorry, there's a lot of background.
Yeah.
It's okay.
All right. So did you guys hear the question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So
Anybody?
miracles, are they real or not? And if they are, so how come we don't experience them today? Or if we do, where are they? Where are the miracles? And what's going on with faith? When people say, well, if you don't experience any miracles in your life, it's because you don't have enough faith.
I think I'll start by saying I think when we think of miracles, we oftentimes think of large, um, blown out type of. I was driving in my car, somehow the road fell off, and I was still driving, and I landed on the other side. When that happens, you'd be like, "Oh my gosh, that was a miracle!" But we don't see the small things as miracles as well. Like I went to this place and something told me to turn around, and by the time I turned around, an accident happened. That's a miracle. But people don't view it like that. They just view it as, oh, that that was just by chance. I think a lot of people only consider it miracle based on the size of the action, or they just kind of place it as, oh, that's God's grace and things of that sort. But I do believe that miracles exist. For each person is different. It could be large, it could be small, it can not be for self, it could be for a family member or something of that sort. So I do believe that it's there. I think you would get more believers as far as like Christians and things like that if we were to see more miracles. And what I mean by see more miracles is see the big ones, see the Noah when he um, was in the ark, and see Moses when he made the Red Sea. If I'm back in the Bible time and you tell me, God is real, and then you make the sea open up, I'm gonna easily be like, yeah, God is real. Like, look at this. This is the impossible that actually happened. That'll make believers really quick. But if you're just like, yeah, God is real, and you tell me a small story, I'm gonna say, that's kind of by chance. So I think that's the difference there when you talk about the miracles.
I think it's important, and I love the fact that you put it that way. I think it's important that we look at the small miracles that happen every single day and we recognize that these things are miracles. And I also think that there are huge miracles that do happen that people just put on science, like the fact that we were able to go onto the moon. To me, that's a miracle. Or the fact that we can fly in airplanes and trips that used to take days and months and years now take just a few short hours. I think that's a miracle because that's not something that could have happened a long time ago. Now I understand science has a big part to play in it, but I think that God gave us the understanding and the knowledge for us to do these things, and the fact that we can now do them safely and like regularly is a miracle.
I want to say I agree with both Mandy and Kels, because we do see miracles. We see small miracles and big miracles. The issue, people are not reporting the small miracles because, like, well, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. So you don't hear it often because people are discounting it. And some of the big that do happen, we have the issue of we are now smarter for doing things people a long time ago had no ability to do. We have science, we have technology, so we start to explain away the miracle. Whereas before, it's like, oh my God, this happened. How could this happen? This must be God. But now that we have a way to explain it, we start explaining how it happened.
Yeah.
So it's dictated. This is no longer a miracle. It's the same way, does God still speak? People will from the cloud just, you shall not go to that. Well, God didn't speak to me, but he does speak to us in our calm season, or when he sends someone to us, then we need to question it. Wait, God speak to me, or did this person just want me to sing? So it's the same way. We happy. We just good where we start to explain it away.
It kind of cut off a little bit. I think we do understand like the gist of what you were saying, though.
So
I was
go
gonna
ahead.
say, but isn't when you go to church and somebody is giving testimony, isn't that almost like a list of miracles in their lives?
Yeah, yeah. Usually, pastors ask people to come and share their testimony. They come and tell you that something miraculous that they believe happened to them, or something that happens to their family or their children, and they tend to share that experience with you. Um, as as we sit in church and we hear these things, I guess the question I want to ask then is, how is it that someone can pray for a miracle, for God to heal their loved one, and two people pray, but one is healed and one is not healed?
Can
So,
can we
uh,
can we take a step backward, please?
sorry.
Can we take one step backward?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Can someone look up the Merriam-Webster dictionary and read out loud what the definition of miracle is? Because I think that we should come to a consensus rather than everyone giving their opinion on what they think a miracle is, when miracle is a word in English that has a definition.
Yeah, I think Mandy kind of touched on that in a way, the way she respond to the question. It says that miracle is something that is a surprising and welcome event that is not explicable by nature or
Ex-
scientific laws, and is
Excellent.
therefore considered to be the work of a divine agency. But then they give you a lot of other explanation. I think, Mandy, if my memory serves me right, the way you responded is that um, there are things that we don't understand, that we just because we don't understand them doesn't mean they're not miracles by themselves. For example, you mentioned how the way we travel today, it's like a miracle, because
Yeah.
what used to take days today, it takes, a trip that's supposed to take weeks back then can take days today, or 1 or 2 days. So science has, um what was the word? When we talk about if there was a gap between science and religion, I always tell you guys that I believe in science as well. There are times science help us to understand things better. So things that maybe once upon a time we used to say that it's a miracle, today we can say, well, yeah, science, it's science. Science is what was being used to do that particular thing. Having said that, I think what Mendy said is that God is also the one who gives the knowledge, so that way, if that knowledge is being used, he's still considered a miracle at that particular time. Is that correct?
That's what I was trying to say. The fact that we have like the mental capability to do these facts and these figures and get us to that point, I think that's a miracle, because that thought had to be put into your head. It didn't just.
Yeah, but why didn't God put the thought in someone's head 5,000 years ago? Why did it take us so long to learn how to take a rocket to the moon? Why did it take us so long to learn how to go from New York to California in a car, a train, or an airplane, as opposed to on a horse? So, I mean,
Well,
in my opinion, and I am definitely the kid who's doing his own thing on this subject matter, the basic fundamental of the definition of miracle is I don't know. Something happened and I don't know how it happened. Everything else is our own prejudices and fears and justifications poured onto something. Throughout history, when things happen that we can't explain, in order for us to feel comfortable with ourselves, we have to give it religious attributes or evil attributes or witchcraft attributes. All you got to do is say something happened. I don't know how it happened. I can't explain it, because that's the only answer. That's all it is. I don't know.
Yeah. So let's decipher what you're
So is
saying a little.
Lewis saying? Is Lewis saying that he believes that there are still miracles, or
No, he
no?
doesn't want to call it miracle because he's saying whatever that is, he doesn't know what it is.
I
It is
think, I
something
think,
that we
I think,
cannot explain.
I think, I think, to help kind of clarify it quick, if I'm wrong, Lewis, feel free to jump in. That oftentimes when we can't explain something that's happened, when it's inexplicable, we try to explain it away by either it being evil, a miracle, or a superstition, right? So it's like put in these
100% correct.
boxes because we don't know how to explain it. So dependent on your belief is the box that you check off.
Correct. When there's only one box. But there's only one box. I don't know. That's the only real, rational, logical box. I don't know.
I guess my question is that, I don't know that I I think that yeah, there isn't. I think that's what faith is, right? Like when you take, when someone says you take a leap of faith, you don't know what's going to happen, but you believe based off of your principles that something that God has your back and that something good is going to happen out of it. And so when it doesn't, and I think trying to go back to Monty's question initially, that if two people, like I have a girlfriend and I know someone else, both mothers had cancer, and one mother survived and the other one didn't. And one day the other one said, I don't know why my mom didn't, right? And so like they probably prayed the same, and I don't know, but that question comes, trying to bring it back to Mundy's original question, why does then God allow, I guess, miracles to happen for some people and not? Like yesterday was 9/11. There were a lot of people who were supposed to be in that building. I hear that story all the time, that like their train was late, or they got into an argument with their spouse, and then there were people who were in that building. Are we saying that their faith isn't as strong as those who miss, who were in those buildings at that time? And I honestly, I don't know. You know what I mean? I think that's if I want to be truthful about it, like I've seen people who are, I don't know what their relationship with their true relationship with God is, but I know that I've seen people, there are things that I've prayed for that I really wanted that I didn't get. Does it mean that like I didn't pray hard enough, or God didn't want me to have it? A lot of times when it doesn't happen for me, I chalk it up to, okay, well, that wasn't what God wanted for me. I'm going to move on. And I literally tell God, that's not a blessing you want for me. I expect a bigger one. Like, I'm like, yo, let's ante up. You know what I mean? But I don't know the answer to it.
I think there's a difference in when you say I don't know, right? For example, like Lewis was saying, when things just happen and there's no defined answer to how it happened, he just chalks it up as just saying, I don't know. And that's cool, but technically that's the same as saying, it's a miracle without just using the term miracle, because one of the definitions is an extremely outstanding or unusual event, thing, or accomplishment. So pretty much, as an example, if, and this happened before, where the doctor tells the mother, your baby is not going to make it. Such and such and such has happened, et cetera, et cetera. The baby's not going to be alive when you push the baby out. And then the baby comes out alive. And doctors are dumbfounded and things of that sort. You can chalk that up and say, well, I don't know how the babies come. But the truth is, based off the definition, is it's a miracle that this came out this way. It's unusual. It's an unusual event. It's an unusual thing that has happened. That's a miracle, right? So when you say,
Right.
oh, I don't know how this happened, or I don't know how that's happened, I think it just depends in the context. For example, in Rudy's point, that's for me, that I don't know is a different. That's not in the sense of saying it's a miracle, because that's questioning now. That's more of a question of, well, why didn't I go to work that day? Why was my train late? That's not necessarily a I don't know type thing. It's just
No, but those people consider it a miracle. The people who didn't get on, who didn't go to
oh,
the building,
okay,
are
I see what you're saying.
saying, yeah, they're saying that it's a miracle that they missed the train or they got into this and that they didn't perish in that building. You
But that
understand what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah. Now when you say it that way, that makes sense. But that could also fall into the same category. Like it's unusual that I missed the train. It's unusual that the train was late. Like that never happened. Every morning I do the same and I make so
Okay, we good.
oh, I thought somebody was trying to say it. I mean, so I think it's just it all still comes down to your sense of faith and what you believe in or so, or how you want to view it. But everything we're saying still in lines with that definition of the word miracle. It's
All
just
right.
whether you want to call it a miracle or not.
Let me read this Bible verse for you guys, and it's in line with miracles and prayer and so forth. It says here in James 5 verse 14 and 15, is anyone of you sick? He should call the elders of the church to pray over him and anoint him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer offered in faith will make the sick person well. The Lord will raise him up. So when we look at this, is this is coming from the Bible, but do we continue to do we still do these things today? Or do some of us consider this to be superstitious? You know, to anoint somebody's head with oil who is sick is literally straight from the Bible, and it's telling you this is what we ought to do. You pray for them, you anoint them with oil. So, what do you think is happening here? My understanding is this, okay, and you guys can correct me, and tell me what you think. There are things, and I have to say, I agree with Lewis. There are things that we cannot explain. Now, there's a lot I don't know about medicine. So, if I break my leg and the doctor who's going to take care of me can put it back in place and fix it, right? I don't understand all the process and everything that's involved in putting it back together, but all I know is he can put it back together and I might be able to walk again. To me, that's a miracle on its own. Now, the same way that there are things that happen in the physical realm, I also believe that there are things that happen in the spiritual realm and that we don't understand it, but doesn't mean because we don't understand it, it's not happening, right? So when a doctor takes a hold of me and do what he needs to do to bring healing to my body, that's on a physical realm. But in a spiritual realm, I truly believe that God has many ways as well. Remember, he created the world. In the spiritual realm, we have things that we cannot understand. I remember reading something about, and I was sharing that with my wife the other day, something called quantum level is an actual psychological healing effect upon the one who prayed. When a group of people come together and pray for someone, and if they all agreed upon that thing and put their faith in it, there's healing. The person who's laying in the hospital bed, hearing this and feeling this and listening to the prayer, they their body begins to change. And in fact, there's an article. I'm going to put that the article here in the link for you guys to check it out. There was an article that was actually published just on that to show how the genes have been altered as an expression because the immune system begins to change in the person who was fighting with cancer as a result of the prayers that were being given on behalf of that person. What I'm saying is, I don't understand it, but to me, it's still that's what I will call a miracle. And the same way, when I don't understand what the doctor is doing or needs to do in the physical realm, there are things going on in the spiritual realm that I may not understand just as much. And that's what I'm calling a miracle.
Yeah,
I guess
I
so.
agree.
Then, Pastor, I have a question for you. Kind of going back to the question that I had, and I
Mhm.
think that's the thing that a lot of people who are Christian and non-Christian struggle with is that if someone is praying fervently, they they do everything, they go in a prayer closet, and the person that they themselves continue to be ill, or the person that they're praying for continues to be ill, how come their question is that how come God isn't granting them that miracle? And I think that's what people struggle with, right? That, like,
Let,
Yeah.
let
why
me add. Go ahead. Sorry, I was gonna say. Let me add to that question too, because even myself as a believer, I still have those type
right,
of questions.
right,
Right? It's like God in every Bible verse, in every Bible story, even when you go through certain things, it's like He wants the best for you at the end of the day, right? But I always question why make us go through certain things as believers of you already. If why do we have to struggle at certain time? But we're faithful, we're in church, we're this, that, and the third. We're praying to you, and we're paying demon offering and all this other type of stuff. But yet, I still have challenges and stuff that I have to get. Is my prayer not being answered? And then you see other people, and there's a song by Jonathan McReynolds that always stands out to me that says comparison kills, but the human nature in us always likes to look at other people. So it's like you see other people and they be like, this person is doing great and they don't even go to church. So it's like that doesn't really, add up for me as to why we have to continue to struggle and why our miracles or our blessings don't always come.
Well, I think even in the Bible, most people struggled. Like in the story of Job, um, he had everything and he lost everything. And then he still praised God regardless. And then he gained everything back. But I think he would have still praised God and prayed to God whether he got it all back or not. I
Mhm.
think that because we're Christian or because we have faith, we assume that we are above struggle. And that's really not the case. Most people in the Bible struggled. And I don't think we should lose our faith. I think it's a test. I don't think that we should lose our faith just because we struggle. I think that's when we should cling on more and understand and humble ourselves and be like, God, listen, I'm going through this. It's really hard right now, but I'm going to praise you anyway. I'm going to worship you anyway, love you anyway. I understand it's hard looking at someone else and being, well, they have this, they have that. They're not as religious as me. But again, like God decides, he picks and chooses what he does with what person. And I think we just have to trust that he knows what's best.
I want to see if I can answer the question that Woody asked as well. I mean, it's a very hard question, and my heart goes out to the families of those who have prayed and really trusted that God was going to bring healing to their loved ones, and it didn't happen. I think it's the devil's way sometimes of discouraging us, because my understanding of God has a lot to do with how I'm going to behave. What I mean by that is if I believe that if I have strong faith, whatever I pray for, that God will make it happen, then I prayed and it didn't happen, then I start asking myself, there are either two things. Either God is lying to us about having strong faith, or there's something else going on. Is
right.
it possible that we got this thing backwards? That is not the ones with the strong faith who needs the miracle, but is the one with the weak faith. What I mean
Mm-hmm.
by that is when you have strong faith, for example, Mandy beautifully said, she mentioned Job. And the story of Job, here you find someone with a faith that was so strong that even if God didn't bring all of the blessings back into Job's life, it would matter to Job because he stood on God's side no matter what. The same story goes for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the Bible, where they didn't know what was going to happen if they go into the fiery furnace. They probably assumed that they're going to die, but they were clear when they told the king, it doesn't really matter what happened to us. We already made up our minds that we will not bow down to the statue. So, they didn't know, like I said, what was going to happen afterwards. So the miracle that happens was not necessarily for them, although they benefit from it when they were rescued from the fire. But the miracle that happened was really for the weak of faith, which was the king. Nebuchadnezzar started giving praise to their God. So it was for them. You look at throughout the Bible, it's amazing how we think the Bible is full of miracles. I always tell people that no, it's everything is compact together. So when we read it, you're thinking Jesus walked around and doing miracles and left and right, but that's not necessarily what happened. It wasn't like that at all. Those who experienced miracles in the Bible usually were those whose faith was the weakest. Okay. Now, having a weak faith is not a negative thing. Let me just say this, because even Jesus says, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, okay. So I don't want you to think, oh, strong faith, weak faith, whatever. That's not it. At the end of the day, it's really saying, listen, I don't understand what God is doing, but I trust that He has the best interest in mind. So, and that's hard to say to someone who's holding on to their babies, and or someone who's watching their mom or their father laying in a hospital bed. It's hard for you at that particular moment to say, well, the Lord gives, the Lord takes away. That's not the time for that. Or if you have faith, let's pray because we have faith, and God will heal them. But we don't know. We can pray. Obviously, the Bible encourages us to pray. The Bible encourages us to go before the Lord to anoint them. But at the end of the day, God always have the final say. I think that's what I'm trying to say. Right? So, all right.
Yeah, I
So,
have this like anecdotal story, real quick, Pastor, and I think it goes kind of to what you were saying. I don't know if you guys remember, like there was like a point like years ago where everybody was like seeing like Jesus in different things, like it was like a piece of toast, or like, you know, like say it was like a
yes,
watermark or
yes,
different things. And there was this one time where it was a priest who said, we keep looking for
a miracle.
miracles in things instead of looking for um, Christ in us, right? And I was like, oh, wow, it's like we're trying to find these things so that we can kind of almost like justify our faith to moving on. And he was like, stop looking at like miracles out in the world and look within.
And another thing too, Woody, and I think this goes back to what Market was asking. Sometimes we assume that if people experience miracles in their lives, or if they see people walking on water today, it will be a great miracle. Or open the Red Sea, it will be a great miracle. But I want us to remember the Bible tells us that miracles can also be counterfeit, right? For example, you all remember the story of Moses. When Moses came before Pharaoh, what he was doing, he was performing miracles. But guess what? Pharaoh called his magicians, and they were doing exactly the same thing that Moses was, right? So, when we look at miracles, we have to remember miracles can be counterfeited. And Jesus said that in the end, there will be those who claim to be Christian who can perform miracles in his name, but guess what? They are not on his side. So if someone works a miracle, it doesn't mean that that person is with God, or what that person says is actually correct, right? So what we have to do, that we have to evaluate their teaching based on the word of God, and their teaching on the evidences of God's word. I mean, to me, if I'm standing in front of a serpent and the serpent is speaking, I will quickly call it a miracle. But if the serpent is saying things to me that is contrary to the word of God, it's going to do a miracle. You got to be careful. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Um, so this is from Wendy. She said that often people believe or loving God is conditional when it should be absolute. No matter what God does or doesn't do, we should continue to love Him just as He loves us. I think that
Right.
is in response to the miracle. You pray for a miracle, and that miracle doesn't happen. Lois,
Why?
go
Why?
ahead.
Why should
He
we
said
love
why?
God unconditionally?
Well, let me ask you, why can't you love God unconditionally? Give me
No,
a
no,
you
no,
can.
no, no. That's not. No, 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 no. The reversing the question is not an answer to the question.
Well,
Wendy said
I have a,
that we should love God unconditionally, and my question is why?
I have
Well,
a,
I mean, you don't have
So
to.
it's
You
not.
don't have to love God unconditionally. Really, at the end of the day, it's your own choice. Um,
Oh, okay, all right, yeah. Well, I agree with that. But I mean, ultimately, I don't think that loving your parents should be unconditional. Why should it be?
but there's a difference between parents and God.
I have a,
What?
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you. What is the difference?
Uncle Jimmy, you want to take this?
Yeah, I have one of the things that I've found is that a lot of times we uh, take love for what it isn't. What we just when we describe love, I think we inaccurately describe love. I don't take love as an emotion. Love is a conviction. Because if love was just emotion, emotions are fleeting, you know, because you can be angry at somebody you love. You can somebody that you love makes you sad, you know. Um, and if we say that God is love, and we know that, and God is the embodiment of love, so and we know that God is unchanging. So when we decide to love, that is something that is supposed to be unchanging. So love if parents, okay, um, parents do things many times that would make you say, man, you're a terrible parent, you know, and I hate you, you know. But the love aspect of it, when you have made the conviction in your heart to the love aspect, you may not like what your parents have done for you, but you have that love conviction in you, so that you don't want to see harm befall them. That's why I think when it says love your enemy, it doesn't mean go and hug them and kiss them and all this stuff. I think it's just a conviction that you decide that you want the best for them no matter what. No matter how much they hurt you, you want the best for them, because God is love, and no matter how much we hurt Him, He wants the best for us no matter what. And I think that if we take love and turn it into just a fleeting emotion, because love, things are wrapped around love, but love itself is a decision, in my opinion, to commit to words not coming. But yeah, loving myself is a decision, it's a conviction. This is what I decide um, to do.
So just like kind of like following up on that, I think love is it's an interesting word because it's a noun and a verb, but sometimes we also use it as an adjective. And I think depending on like how you use it, I think that that we the love that we typically as believers have for God is very different than the love that we have for our parents, right? And so that's where you decide whether it's going to be, an action item or not, right? Like your parents can still disappoint you, your parents can still, you can get in conflict with your parents. You know what I mean? You can not speak to your parents, right? Like, because they've done something to you. That is a very different relationship than a relationship we tend to have with God.
Completely
While there
disagree.
are things that there, I'm sorry?
I couldn't disagree more. Every single thing that you just said about your parents in this show, on this episode, different individuals have talked about doing the same thing with God. I
Hold on,
haven't
wait,
prayed
but
for X number of days. God didn't perform this miracle for me, and I don't understand, and I'm frustrated. I think that the relationship that we have with our physical parents is the closest thing that we have to describing the exact same relationship that we tend to have with God.
so what I was going to follow up with is that, like, I think we get disappointed because in the things that we want God to do for us, and we don't understand why it hasn't happened yet. I have not gotten into an argument with God. I mean, I don't, if you have, that's cool. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? I haven't spent time where I'm like, you know what, God, I'm not talking to you no more because you said this and I didn't like the tone. You know what
Oh,
I mean? Like, you said this, like, or me saying to God, I'm an adult. You can't talk to me that way. Like, that doesn't, I mean, I'm sorry, it doesn't happen. So it's a different, while there are levels of disappointment because you don't understand why that miracle or that prayer hasn't been answered, right? That is very different than a relationship that I have with God. So, and there are people, so that's, I mean, it's all
Um,
opinion, right? But I just want to, going back to, like,
I think and I'm sorry, I got kicked out like 2 times in the middle of the conversation. So, but what I wanted to say is in relationship to what we're talking about is this. The Bible is a book for grown-ups. Okay. What I mean by that is it requires for us to engage and to reflect. It requires us to think and to study and to seek answers. It's challenging at times because it requires for us to seek God and to keep on seeking Him. So the only relationship, Louis mentioned how the only relationship we know that is the relationship we have with our parents. Having said that, we also know that not all relationship with parents are the ideal relationships. There
right,
are parents who abuse their children emotionally, sexually, physically. There are parents who are absentee fathers who are never there for their children. There are parents who, frankly, don't care whether you live or die. But when it comes to God, that's not the case. In fact, when
To
you
some
look at
people,
the story of the Bible, it's the opposite. From the moment that we have sinned, God has been trying to reach and bring us back unto Himself. Everything that we have read in the Bible, it's always God trying to reach out to bring us back unto Himself. Every story, whether it's the story of David or Samuel or Samson or Moses, all of those, we call them Bible heroes, but in reality, it's not about them. It's really about God working throughout history, trying to win us back unto Himself, unite us back unto Himself, right? There was a problem. The problem happened at the garden. Remember, the once upon a time we were not afraid of God. Once upon a time we were in unity with God. But when sin came to play, the very first thing that men did, we went away from the presence of God. You don't run away from someone you love. When I come home, I don't expect my kids to run away from me. I expect my kids to be happy that I'm home and to welcome me to into their presence. But that's not what happened when Adam and Eve sinned. They went away. In fact, the Bible said they felt naked, they felt exposed. That's what sin does. It separates us from the love of God. So for us to compare our love to a father's love on this side of the universe exactly as what God's love is to us. it's not a fair comparison at
Yes.
all.
Yes.
Or
Okay.
at all.
Yes.
All right. So you said that. Well, I'm trying to tie it into the concept of miracles, and you said that some parents abuse their kids in a variety of ways, and then you went to the Bible. So, at one point in history, according to the Bible, God killed everyone on the planet except for 8 people. At another point in history, he's making a deal with Abraham, saying, "If you can find 50 good people, I won't burn the planet. I won't burn those 2 towns. If you can find 20 good people, I won't burn the town." And then at another time in history, according to the Bible, God chose a group of people and said, "I want you to go to this geographical place on earth, and I want you to kill everyone there because I don't like those people and I want you to have their land."
Wait,
Mm.
And
wait,
this is the
wait,
same.
wait, wait. He didn't just send them to kill people because he doesn't like them. It's more than that. Right now, we're paraphrasing.
Hold
Yeah,
on.
yeah, yeah.
Yes, I admit to you that I am paraphrasing, but at the same time, you're talking about how God is trying to um, reclaim his love relationship, this conviction with everyone. And what I'm trying to tell you is, factually speaking, according to the Bible, not my opinion,
Hmm.
there are people in the Bible that would say, "What kind of love relationship are you trying to rekindle with me?"
You know what? I'm so glad that you brought that up, because then we can start talking about anger, right? How can we be instructed to get rid of all anger? And that anger is unwise and for the fools, yet God is described as getting angry, which I think is what you just touched on when you mentioned that he wiped out the entire world. He only left 8 people there. People look at that as a very aggressive, angry action that God had taken. So I think it would be great for us to touch on this topic, because it's a conversation people have all the time about um, difficult Bible questions.
It is a difficult Bible question, and I'm glad Louis tapped into it again. And my understanding of this is simply this, okay? And again, you don't have, those of you who are watching this show, you don't have to agree with everything that we are saying. We want you to dive into the Bible, go back into it, research some more, study some more, and see if you can come up with your answers as well. What we are saying, or what I'm saying, is that every time that God steps into our world, he steps into our world to bring us into himself in every way possible. So let me explain what I mean by that, right? We talk about anger. Mendy asked the question about anger. Okay, God Himself is saying it's unwise and for us to be angry, and yet you see God in a way. I'm putting it in quote, almost as if that God is acting in anger. Well, let's take an example. Let's take, for example, when you go to the story in Ezekiel chapter 24, okay, verse 9 through 14. Here we see God working again. Let me see if I can explain this. The city of murderers is doomed. The Bible says, "I myself will pile up the firewood. He will bring more wood, more flames, and he will cook the meat. He will boil away the broth and burn up the bones. And now set the empty bronze spot on the coals and let it get red hot." I mean, when you're reading this verse, you're
Mhm.
like, what kind of God is this? What's going on here? But the question is not whether or not God spoke these words through his prophets out of anger. The really important question we have to ask ourselves is what actually happened after he spoke these words. Did God use his power to destroy those about whom he spoke, those terrifying words? Or did the rebellion separate them from his protection,
Hmm.
thus resulting in
Hmm.
their destruction?
Mm.
Sometimes we look at it, it's almost like, we tell our kids, don't touch the stove, it's hot.
Yeah.
Don't touch the stove, it's hot. You will get burned if you touch the stove. And more and more, I mean, we tell them, and we put parameters to prevent them from touching the stove. But eventually, what do? They ignore everything that we say, and they went and touched the stove and get seriously burned. But then turn around and say, "You the one who bought the stove. It's your fault because you put a
Yep.
stove in the house." We blame God. What I'm trying to say is the children of Israel, they refused to follow God. They refused to follow his methods. They refused to follow his principle. But God did not hurt them. He set them free. He gave them to what they chose, a life separated from him. Remember, from the get-go, God was clear with the children of Israel. He said, when you refuse me, or when you no longer want me to be your king, you're gonna want men to be your king. But this is what's going to happen to you and to your children when men becomes your king. This is what they're going to do to you. This is what they're going to do to your children. Now, in regards to how is it possible that God can send, for example, you read in the Bible where God can send his children to go and wipe out an entire nation. What kind of loving God will do that? Well, again, I want you to think from this understanding that war is a terrifying thing. Today, we know what happened when soldiers goes to war and they come back home and all the things that they have to deal with psychologically. God knew that. There was no psychiatrist back then. There was nobody who was going to help these people. And he knew the only way he can limit the amount of pain and misery that these people are going to endure is by wiping them out. But let me explain what I mean when I say wiping them out. The Bible calls it asleep. We have problem with it. But the Bible calls it asleep. Though there are times that God will put people to sleep if you don't have anything to do with God. If you want to be by yourself, you don't want God as your leader, you don't want God as your God, He'll let you be. And the end result is whenever the devil steps in, he comes and kill and destroy. And that's the result. We experience destruction. But just because we experience destruction, we always see the hands of God. Listen, in every destruction you read in the Bible, there was always a group of people that were saved. They were safe. We have to say, well, what happened here? How come everybody's not dead? Well, it's because God's hand is still upon them. There's still a group of people who say, yes, I'm going to follow you. Yes, I'm going to do it your way. Yes, I'm going to believe in you. Yes, I'm going to try to do it your way. It's not that they were doing it to please God, but they were doing it because if I cut myself out of life, listen, if I put a bag over my head and decide from this point forward, I no longer want to breathe the way that God intended me to breathe. What's going to happen? I'm going to suffocate. I'm going to die. But it's not God who killed me. I made that choice. Your
That made sense.
Wow.
I expected rebuttal. I was ready for it to go.
All right. So how we doing with the anger question? Now, speaking about anger, how many of us have anger issues?
I do.
I used to.
How,
Yeah, I'm
how
with
do we
Jimmy.
deal with our anger, guys? Question. This is a question show. How do we deal with our anger?
I go to the gun range. I take my bullets, take my gun, I let it out on some pieces of paper, hung up about 10, 20 feet away.
Okay. Anybody else? How do you guys deal with your anger? What's the solution to the anger issue?
For me, it's the different tactics. There's the gun range option. I've done that before. I'm a fitness person, so I'm always in the gym. So I kind of take it out on weights. Basketball, I'll take it out on opponents. So if you're guarding me, good luck, especially if I'm upset. I just think there's different ways to kind of release it. I think if you are angry at something or someone, you do need to release it. Being a married man as well, I get upset. I may get angry at my wife. I get upset at my kids or stuff like that. I'm way better now than what I was before, and that just takes time and growth. I used to pop off all the time, especially in grade school. If there was a situation you looked at me funny, it was what's up? What you trying
I
to
remember.
do?
I'm
And it
about that life. You about that life. Get
yeah,
it.
it wasn't good. I'll be honest, it wasn't good because it didn't take me anywhere that I needed to be in life. But thank God I was able to, change my mindset on a lot of things. But anger is hard to control if you don't have the correct outlet. Um, Things will make you upset, and depending on the type of person you are, if you allow it to change your demeanor immediately, or if you bottle it up. Some people could bottle it up and find an easy release. Some people could go to sleep, and the next morning, I mean, it's they forgot about it. Me, I tend to bottle things up a lot until I reach that tipping point and I blow up. So I've learned to find releases. I learned to find outlets to help me release that anger. Um, that's what's been working for me.
Okay. We have someone on the line who say, this sister Carol say, for her personally, she say until she talks about it, it tends to control her. For anger, it's a serious issue. And I don't think we spend enough time in the
Thing in
church.
the front.
Patty, can you put yourself on mute?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think Mondi might have frozen.
Monday froze.
Did somebody else answer?
Yes.
I
Somebody
think
else can talk about their anger.
I
I
think
w-
what Monty's trying to get back on. I think for me, anger has always been like, I don't know. I think when I was younger, Kels, I was about that life too. I went to Catholic school. I used to stay out after a lot because I was like, meet me on the playground. I was about, you know what I mean?
Let's solve this. Let's solve this.
Go, like, you know what I mean? And I don't know if apparently my dad was like that too. So maybe it's in the genes. Maybe it's a Dorsonville thing. But
Facts.
but I think for me now, like it's funny because my sister and my nephew said something and my sister was like, "You're just like your aunt." And I was like, there are things I just don't let get to me anymore.
Mhm.
Honestly. Because I realized that a lot of times there are people who are in your lives that try to push buttons. And I realized that has more to do with them than it does with me, and I'm not gonna allow them to control my disposition.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so I try to do a really good job of like saying like, okay, well, this is what it is. I'm not going to let that like ruin my day or or dwell on it because it's going to fester in me. And there's no way that I can be who I need to be if I allow that to fester into me. So there are different ways. Listen, I talk it out. I call my sister. I talk it out. I call my girlfriends because I'm not going to say, like, I get frustrated at things too, right? But I talk it
Yeah.
out a lot of times. I don't think I've ever like cried being angry or whatever, but I try not to hold it because I realize that oftentimes people, it's like a cliche, hurt people, right? It's a cliche, but it's true.
It
And you
is.
can
Yeah.
see it sometimes when somebody's angry or in a bad mood and they take it out on you. And sometimes I take a step back and I'm like, wait a minute, this has nothing to do with Rudy or Dorsonville, right? This is about you and you're crazy. You have a moment, deal with your crazy, and we can come back to it. And I've literally been at meetings and said, you need to go like at work. You know what I mean? There are two things. I'm like, first, you don't speak to me that way. Secondly, you want to may take a moment because you don't want me to reach that level of anger, right? Like the way you're speaking to me, you don't want me to speak to you in that regard. So let's just take a breather and take a step back. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So,
So how does I guess where Monday Pastor B was going with this is he's back. Also, so I guess he was going into it with we know in the Bible that it shows that God has and Jesus has demonstrated him. But yet we're in a world that usually tell us to control our anger. And it kind of seems like we're going
I'm gonna go ahead and shake my head already. right?
You're supposed to control your anger. Even as a parent, you kind of tell your kid to control your anger. But yet, in the Bible, there are many places where God and Jesus did not control his anger. So how is it okay to be following something, but yet feel like there are many instances where we didn't control our anger? I mean, they didn't control their anger. But we are preaching to our kids as well to
think they
control
were
their
in
anger.
perfect control of their anger.
So I'm
I
gonna
would say, if I
I'm gonna
may.
let Jimmy go real quick, because Jimmy hasn't said anything yet. But to kind of counter what Patty said about God and Jesus, this is my mindset, right? Everybody can picture God how they want to picture God, right? To me, God don't play, right? We're talking about God, right? We're not talking about Jesus. Let's just talk about God real quick. God don't play. If you don't act accordingly or do it the way he wants it or the way he had it planned out, God's the type of God that's like, I'm gonna wipe you out and I'm gonna start over. Like that's how he is. So when Jesus came into play, right? Even Jesus got to a point where he had anger. When he flipped over all those tables and all that stuff like that, he wasn't flipping it over just to make a mess. He was mad. He was pissed off. So we're talking about Jesus getting to that point, and he's the Son of God. So when you talk about us as Christians, like, yeah, we got to try to WWJD. Remember those bracelets that came out? Like, yeah, we got to try to be like him as much as possible, but there's no way we can always get to that point and be like, oh, I'm Christian, can't do that. Or, nope, can't do that. I'm Christian. No, we got feelings, we got anger, we got emotion, we got all that stuff that's gonna come up depending on what's bothering or what buttons it push or how it affects us. But Jimmy was trying to talk. Go ahead, Jim.
No, I was saying that they were in perfect control of their anger, because of all the things that we can do as a people and or that have happened as a people, to anger God or to anger Jesus, to the point where they actually did anything about it. I think they were in perfect control of their anger, because even before Jesus came to the earth, we were still receiving grace because God gave warnings. And so because you get the, like Monday was saying earlier, because you get the consequences of your disobedience, doesn't mean that you, if I say to my daughter right now, if you do that one more time, after the fourth time I told you not to do it, I'm going to spank you. And then she goes and looks me in the eye and does it. I'm going to spank her. And it's not because I lost control of my temper or anything like that. I am angry because she's being disobedient, but she has to understand that there's a consequence for her actions. And as far as where Jesus goes, flipping the tables, I think if he had lost his temper, if he actually lost his temper, people would have actually been hurt.
Right.
He'd have been walking around healing people left and right because of the aftermath. Because or he would have just, just like he would just use his power. He has all this power, and he just going through this, you guys, dust, and that's it. But he wants to show the people that you guys have taken something sacred and turned it to something profane, and he was getting rid of the profane right then and there. And sometimes we as Christians have to take action and not just let things happen. Not to go into serious topics, but there's some things that we witness, but as Christians we don't want to get angry, but we let it continue and people suffer.
Disclaimer.
Can I say something?
Wait, disclaimer. We got a disclaimer.
No children were beaten during this episode. No children not promoting child abuse.
Yes, we are not doing that. Can I ask some? Can I say something?
Yes.
God is omnipotent. God is good, and I'm not an atheist. But at what point, all I'm hearing is everything been justified. Even if it's bad, it's justifiable because it's God.
All right.
At what point is it not justifiable?
All right. I'm going to take a crack at this. I got the husband. Now I'm going to try.
There is no point.
Come on, let's be for real. At what
No,
point
it's
is
true.
it not
It's true.
justifiable?
It's true. In the eyes of those who subscribe to the Abrahamic religions, there is no point where God's actions are unjustified.
Okay.
That is a fact. That is a factual statement.
First of all, I want to say that God does not have an anger issue. Okay. God is not a mafia. He doesn't walk around with a 4x4 or with a gun in his hand. If you do what he tells you to do, he will bless you. He will bless your family. You will prosper in the land. And if you don't do well, he will beat you up. He will break your legs. He will steal everything you have, and he will kill you and kill your family at the end. This is what the devil has made us believe that who God is. But if you take the time to study the word, you will understand that's not the character of God. Someone on Facebook mentioned, and I want to read it. This is for Michael Benavis. Thank you so much for being part of our show. This is what he said, and I agree with him. Michael said that there is a difference between regular anger and righteous indignation. Regular anger and righteous indignation. I will say that there are two kinds of anger.
Of
God
course, I
only
was.
has one kind of anger. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. All right. Again, we're looking at it, we are sinners. We're looking at it from a sinner perspective, but God is a holy God, okay? I don't know if you realize that whenever we mention the word that God is angry, right? We always see God again moving. When God is angry, he's angry when wrong is being committed. Is angry when wrong is being committed. Show me one part of the Bible where God was angry because someone was doing good, someone was doing well. It was always when he was doing something that was wrong. So to me, that's an indication for us as well. We can be angry, and I agree with Jimmy. The place for somebody to show anger.
So, hold on, Pastor. Can everyone put their phones on mute until they're speaking? Because it's a lot of background noise and it's hard to hear the pastor.
Correct. So we need to show our anger. Just recently, this movement, Black Lives Matter, this is the result of people being angry. We are angry at what's being done to us, and we decided enough is enough. Most of the social movement, social reform that we know about, they all came out as a result of anger. So I'm not saying it's not okay to be angry. In fact, the Bible says you can be angry, but sin not. The idea is you have to use your anger to do good. Even as parents, I think one of the best, and Louis mentioned being a parent, and I believe that we all have the great opportunity for to go back to our kids and say, you know what, we messed up, we blew it, because there are times as parents we shout it when when we really should just listen to our kids. We get angry at them when in reality what we really needed to do is take the time to understand what's happening with them, why they're doing what they're doing, so that we can reach out to them at a different level. But we fail to do that because we allow anger to take the best out of us. I think what Jimmy was saying earlier, and I think what my brother Michael is saying, is that we have to use anger in the proper way. We have to use it, let it channel us, but use it in a proper way so that we can do good out of it. Now, I'm gonna go back to something that I think Pat and mentioned earlier, and Louis, I believe, right? I don't have any problem with people getting angry with God. Um, in fact, in the Bible, we see even Cain. Cain got angry with God over the fact that God accepted his brother's sacrifice and not his. Job, Job got angry with God. So at the end of the day, what did God do? God said, listen, I hear you, but let me tell you who I am. You are angry with me. It's probably because you have a misunderstanding of who I am. Let me show you, Job, who I am. I am the creator God. And this is what I do. This is the way I behave. This is when I come into people's life. This is the kind of things that happens when I'm into their lives. And God opened the avenue for Job to see a side of him that Job didn't understand before that. Job is the same person who was, who was offering sacrifices for his children because he believes he can offer sacrifices so that God will forgive the sins of his children. That was a misunderstanding of God. How can you ask God to forgive the sins of your children when they are the age themselves when they should be asking God for forgiveness? You understand? So there are times in our lives that we don't have a good understanding of God, that we can get angry with God. And even for us as adults, we may be angry with God for many reasons. Like I say, people are angry with God for all kind of reasons. Maybe something happens in my life as I was growing up. Maybe I have resentment toward God because I believe God allows something to happen to my family. Maybe He took away my mom or my dad or someone that was close to me, and I'm angry with God. But you know what? It's okay. What I don't want people to think is if you're angry with God, it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. But allow that to drive you toward God instead of drive you away from God. I think that's where I disagree with some of you guys. Yes, Pat.
I think Lewis wanted to say something, but then the only thing I want to say is, it's to me, it's not a matter of agreeing. It's a matter of some things to me are just not, justifiable. And the more you read, the more you go back and forth, and it's just not adding up. Leap of faith or not, it's just not adding up. And just because I know that they're not adding up, I'm not going to sit here as a Christian and say, well, just be, God is all good, God is this, God is that, and I just have to believe it. If they're not adding up, I am going to try to
But
research as much
what
as I
I
can.
think my
It's
point.
just not
What do you
adding
mean by
up.
Bible? I'm confused. I just want to. Maybe I'm harking on a small point because I want to get clarity on what you're saying is like either not right or justifiable.
Many verses in the Bible, as I previously mentioned, would say certain things. Like you look at the anger, you look at just the Bible itself about God, who God is supposed to be, who Jesus is supposed to be. When you start reading the Bible and then you start looking at other philosophical ways or other books, some of the mention is not necessarily adding to what the Bible is saying. I'm still doing a lot more reading. So, with that said, I am not going to say I am a Christian, but I'm not going to say, and I mentioned it before, I don't necessarily believe that the Bible is the all be all. So, with that said, most Christians believe the Bible is the all be all, and they're not questioning certain things, or even if they're questioning, they go back to a leap of faith within the Bible. For me, it's not the case because I don't believe that that one book is saying all the truth that we as human beings need to know.
I want to tell you, Pat, the Bible has enough truth for us. But like I said before in this show, God doesn't only speak through the Bible. He gives us science. He gives us nature, right? I said this before. I said, God doesn't only speak. Listen, before the Bible was written, God was still God. He was still speaking. So he speaks through nature. He speaks through science. He speaks through his word, and he speaks to us. When I say speak to us, I'm not saying he literally speaking in my ear and I hear the voice of God talking to my ear like I'm listening to you talking to my. No. And the experience that we have, there are people who don't believe in God, but there are some experiences that they go through that brings them closer to God. We can't say that doesn't happen. It does happen. And the same way, there are some people who believe in God, but because they went through some tough experiences, they don't want to have anything to do with God. That happens as well. What I'm trying to say is when this is happening, what we need to do is figuring out what's happening in us, because usually the problem is not God. The problem is not the fact that the Bible is written a long time ago. No, the problem is not with the book. The problem is my understanding of who God is, my understanding of my relationship with God is not even a thing. Some people don't care to have a relationship with God, and that's okay. The Bible tells us it will happen. Not everybody is going to want to have a relationship with God. But what I'm saying is, just because they don't have a relationship with God doesn't mean that God loves them less.
Can I say something on
Yes.
that? One of the things I think leads to the problem with us and the understanding of God is one of the things you mentioned earlier, and the whole basis of this today's program is how church and religion has taken the Bible and manipulated it in a sense to do whatever they want with it. So then you take, instead of us having a reaching out to God as a loving Father that's there for us and that has His best interest for us, we see him as this figure, like a communist, a dictator, or a monarch, that if we cross him, if we don't come to him correct every time, we're going to lose. We have to come with him, um, our heads down, and and that's sometimes that even translates to how we treat our children. Oh, there you see. And That's how it comes out to somehow how we treat our children. Like don't say no to me. Don't ask me why. I'm this and that, and that's how sometimes we look at God. I've heard people say God is not your friend, and I'm actually opposed to that.
Yes.
Because God is my friend.
He
Because
is my friend.
there's certain times where, like, when I pray, I do have, those, formula prayers, our Heavenly Father, this and that, when I'm doing public prayers. But when I'm by myself, when I'm walking, when I'm driving, I like, these past couple of weeks, I've been just regular things like, God, this day better be good. I need it to end at this time. I don't want a long day. And you've been working it. I know you can work it some more. Let's do it. Thank you. Goodbye. And I don't, not even know in Jesus' name. I talk to him like I'm talking to him on a phone or something like that. And when you people need to realize that religion has been indoctrinating people to be controlled for a very, very
Right.
long time.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and the Bible is not a book of control. It's a book of freedom. It's a book of, look, these are the parameters in which you're made to operate. And if you go out of these parameters, life is going to be a little bit more difficult for you. You're going to have hardships, but if you follow these guidelines, you're going to have everything that you need to make it through. And religion just destroyed that.
I think I wanted to kind of add to that, Jimmy. You said exactly what I wanted to say, but I wanted to say something else that oftentimes, and I don't want to say it's antiquated or old, but I know another way of kind of like people used to think is that you don't question God, right? Or you don't question the Bible. And that's a false premise to start with. You're supposed to question because through those answers your faith builds, right? And I think that in the past, I mean, I grew up a certain religion in the past, and then I kind of was one of those people that like I tried like different churches, and I found a church that like didn't make me feel like bad, or that like I was like not a good Christian for answering questions, or asking questions, I should say, or even kind of like challenging God, right? Like the idea that like you said, Jimmy, like there are some times where I'm like, all right, God, what's up? Like I tied this month. I did all the things you said. Now I'm challenging you. And I think that we have to get the kind of like almost like old school way of thinking about our relationship with God, and like reevaluate it and see how we can move forward, and understand that, like Jimmy said it perfectly, the Bible is a guideline, right? Like there are things in there that helps us to see in the past what we can use in our present day and in the future. It's like, Patty, I know you're a scientist. There's when you go into a lab, there's a set of guidelines that you follow. Now you use those guidelines to help you with what you want to do going forward. And I think it's just kind of like maybe shifting how we think about what the Bible is and what religion has indoctrinated into us, and to be more free thinking about going forward.
And I totally agree with you, Woody. I agree with Jimmy as well. It is a set of protocols. And I think throughout this whole show and before is what I've been saying, to me, the Bible is a set of protocols. But it's not, to me, it's not the final set of protocols, because I'm still going through a lot of different other protocols, because when I see whole, I'm no longer saying, well, this is the Bible and you don't question it. When I see holes in the Bible, I go into other books. I go into Buddhism. I go into Judaism. I go into other books to try to understand, what does that hole mean? And I know Pastor D went back and said, well, this is something you're doing because maybe it's your own personal stuff because you're looking for something. Call it as it may, but I think that as an intellectual, as someone of wisdom, we are in the society now. Just because something is a set of protocols does not necessarily mean that's all we do. Pastor D himself has gone to seminary school, and the Bible has been one of the tools that he used, but he has used many other tools.
But the only difference, Pat, the only difference is, and I'm gonna go back to what Woody was saying. I think the only difference is when I read everything else, I read them through the lens of
Right.
Jesus,
Right.
through the lens of the Bible. In other words, I guess what I'm hearing is that there are other books, and you consider all these books equally, um, as the source of all knowledge. And I'm saying to you, it might work for some people, but at the end of the day, there is. I mean, Woody mentioned you're a scientist. As a scientist, you don't just read everything and swallow up everything that you read. You go through you have to figure out how to decipher truth from fiction. You have
Agreed.
to figure out what's helping you to come up with your hypothesis.
Agreed.
The Bible is very clear. One of my favorite texts in the Bible is Isaiah 118. And the reason is because that verse gives us the right and the freedom to do what we are doing right now on this show. The verse says for us to come, let us reason together. I want you to understand how powerful that verse is. Before God even deals with our sin problem, before he even tells us that we are sinners and that we are lost and that we need Jesus, no, he says, come, let us reason together. In other words, the word here, the word reason is like parlay. Let's have a conversation. Let's have an understanding. God wants us to have an understanding, because if we don't have a good understanding of who God is, everything else doesn't really matter. You can read all of those other books, but if you don't have a good understanding of who God is, he's gonna that on everything else is gonna mess you up even more. I mean, again,
And I guess what you're
hold on.
saying then,
I want to bring Lewis in. I want to bring Lewis in. Waving. Go ahead,
I,
Lewis.
I have been dying to get a word in edgewise, and please, everyone here has waxed poetic about their points and views. Please, I'm begging for more than 30 seconds this time. The big problem that I have with the Bible, because without the Bible, there is no God. The Bible is the source.
I disagree.
You're allowed to disagree, but I'm still going to make my point.
Correct.
That's allowed.
Correct. Because you can have scientists and parties feel. Hold on.
you have to allow him to make his point.
Hold on, please. There are over 7 billion people on this planet today, and I suspect that there were fewer people on the planet when God destroyed all but 8 people. I suspect that there were fewer people on the planet when he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. When he sent the Jews into Canaan to wipe out everyone so that he could keep his promise to the children of Israel and give them a land filled with milk and honey, means that the people who were disobeying God in Canaan were living in a land filled with milk and honey. But God was nowhere when 6 million Jews were massacred by Hitler. God was nowhere to be found when 10 million Africans were massacred by I forget the name of the monarch from
Idi
Europe.
Amin.
No, not
Oh
Idi
no,
Amin.
Europe.
Yeah, I forget his name. And what every time I hear someone speak about what the Bible says, they always quote something from the Bible and immediately follow it up with what that means is, which to me is a complete contradiction from a book that an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-present being would give to an ignorant sinner who is trying to find and understand him. If you are trying to find and understand me, I'm going to inspire some guys to write some things down on paper, and you have to figure out what is meant by what I inspire them to write. And I understand when people start every day of their life with the thesis that God exists, and therefore everything that I do, study, read, input, all data and information must be justified based on the thesis that God exists. I accept that. I accept that your feelings or anyone's feelings towards God should not be judged. It's okay for you to believe in God. That's fine. But when we step outside of the bounds of logic and reason and what is obvious to prove something that we simply believe, that's where the arguments start. I mean, what this conversation really is so there are a group of people who believe in God, and that's it. There is no argument. I believe in God, period. I don't believe in God, period. I don't know if there is a God, period. That's it. Because if you believe in God, you accept that your belief is based 100% on faith. And faith can't be argued. Anything that can be argued are facts. Facts can be argued. And we are where we are today with all of our technology, with all of our advances in medicine and science and communication. We are where we are because facts are argued. And the concept of God and the belief in it is where it is because it can't be argued. There is no argument for God. You either believe it or you don't believe it. But when you try to justify your belief with a blatant contradiction, that's why you wind up with so many religions.
Yeah, but
So
you
the thing,
see,
hold on. Everybody spoke, please.
Go ahead.
Please, everybody spoke. The way you end all arguments, I believe, it is a personal walk. It is a personal relationship, and I don't need to explain it to you. That's it. This is what I believe, and that's it. There is no justification because the factual points about the Bible, if presented to God-believing people, will be argued. The facts that there are books allegedly written by people who walked with Jesus Christ that are not in the Bible because they contradict the edicts of Christian and Islamic and Judaism, the faith of Judaism, they're not included. So if Mary Magdalene wrote a book, a woman who walked with God, if Saint Peter wrote a book, and those books aren't in the Bible, then the justification is, well, yes, those books were written, but clearly they must not have been inspired by God, so they're not in the Bible. Okay, that makes sense because that's what you believe, and I wasn't there. We think that because something is in a book, it is a fact. Something in a book is someone's interpretation of facts, and we are all flawed. Whether you believe in God or not, we are all flawed. The way we communicate a thing. On this show, there are what, 6, 7 people? If I called one person and whispered something in their ear and asked them to send it around to everyone here today, and when the last person repeated, it would be different because we interpret data differently because of our experiences, because of a litany of things. So if we're going to argue and debate, let's debate the facts. Let's talk about what actually is something that we can prove over and over and over again in a laboratory. Other than that, there is no right or wrong, because our opinions, they're like buttholes. Everybody has one, and no one is necessarily better than the other. But you can't tell me that God does a bunch of things and then let 6 million Jews die. God does a bunch of things and then let 10 million Africans die, and millions of others be mutilated and amputated. There is an obvious and blatant conflict with the concept of God's love. But every time I hear someone say, I agree, but, they're basically saying, I agree, but let me pour what I think to justify my ideology. Okay, God exists. 6 million Jews died at the hand of Hitler. There's a problem with that. God exists. 10 million Africans died, and millions more were mutilated and amputated at the hands of a European dictator. There's a situation there that requires reconciliation, not justification, reconciliation. And quoting the Bible is not going to clear that up for me. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Now, let me just say this. Let me just say this. Although I love you and I respect you as my family, as my brother, but I'm gonna be 100% real with you, because I think that's what you will respect the most. When you talk about the Jews or you talk about slavery, again, it's interesting how we talk about God doesn't exist, but when it comes to things that happen to us, we turn around and say, well, if he did exist, then why did he allow those things to happen? You can't have it both ways. You can't say it doesn't exist and then turn around and says, if it does exist, then how in the world or God will allow something like that? The better question for me is not where was God during the Holocaust? The better question for me is where were us, the human race? Why did the rest of us sit back and allow something like that to happen? We have the freedom of choice. That's the thing. God gave us the free will, and we sat there. Those in power knew what was going on and sat there and let it happen. Look at the situation of our world today. Look what's happening with our black people. We are fighting for our rights. There are still many people who still want to put their feet over our neck. If the world doesn't stand up and say enough is enough, we're going to turn around and say, where was God? Well, God was always there in the heart of mankind. We were supposed to be our borders keepers. We were supposed to watch out for one another and take care of one another. And the more we move away from that, the more we start believing in this atheism kind of attitude, me, myself, and I, and we start believing that all that matters is me. Okay, that goes back to, again, I say this at the beginning of the show, what you believe does have an impact on what you will do or will not do. There are people who believe, guess what? Survival of the fittest. That's what the world is all about. Is I'm going to survive by all means necessary. If that means that I have to kill, steal, destroy, do whatever I have to do, then that's what I will do. But when you look at, that's not the way of the Bible. The Bible doesn't teach us survival of the fittest. It teaches we are borders keepers. It teaches we're supposed to care about the welfare of our brothers and our sisters. And if we don't do anything about it, it's not because God didn't step in, it's because we failed the test. We didn't step in. God cannot take the blame for things that we have control over. What's happening in our world today, this black race and white race and red race and whatever, it's not God. We are doing this to each other. We chose that route. We chose to say, I'm better than you because I make more than you, or I'm white, or you black. We did this to each other. This is not God. God was always there. Jessica said God was always there. He was always there through the good, through the bad. What I try to say, however, is this: throughout history, as evil as mankind has been, the hand of God has always been, in a way, reaching out to us to reconcile us to Himself. The world hates God. The world doesn't want to do it His way. And what happens when we do it our way? We get things like the Holocaust.
I
What
want
happens when we do it our way? We do things to each other like slavery. We do those things to each other because we break away from the protocol. We break away from what was life was designed to be.
so I think sometimes when we talk about God, I think we take God for the good, and when bad happens, we often say, well, where's God at? So, like, when you really want this job, or whether you believe or don't believe, and you pray for it or whatever, and you get it, it's like, yes, thank God. Or, it could be, oh, well, I worked for it, da 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 da. And then when there's bad that happens, we often want to blame God for the bad. And to kind of sum up what I think Pastor D is saying is, you can't just say, well, God caused the bad to happen, because with free will and choice, if you go start back at Adam and Eve, you can't say God caused Eve to eat that fruit, right? She was persuaded by the devil. Like, sin and the devil is a real thing, and that does happen. And a lot of times when it is happening, we can't just sit here and be like, well, God, why you ain't just come down and fix it? Because the truth of the matter is, Eve could have been like, no, Satan, I'm going to roll with God because that's what God said. But she fell under the understanding of this serpent and what this serpent was doing. So she thought that was the truth. When a lot of bad things happen, it's not always from God's hands. And it's not always God's job, in a sense, to fix it. Because if you're living this righteous path, so to speak, and I'm not talking about myself because I'm flawed, but if you're living this righteous path and then you decide to do this, and you off of the path now, you can't go down this turmoil of rockiness and mess and all this stuff and be like, well, God, where you was at? Because God put you on this path. You decided that this path wasn't what you wanted to do, and you wanted to go elsewhere. Well, just like, and not to go back into the parent, relationship, but just like being a parent, sometimes you're gonna tell your kid, hey, don't do that. Don't do that. I wouldn't do that if I were you. This is going to happen. Don't do that. And your kid is probably going to be like, well, what if I do it? And boom, something happens to them. It's because they had that in them where they really just wanted to go off and experience it on their own. The parent now can't where the parent was. The parent could have been right there. And the parent had told the kid several times, don't do that. But if you want to go do what you want to go do, when bad happens to you, don't turn around and be like, yo, God, you let me down. Because then that's not fair.
I have
Can
something
I ask
I
a
want to
question?
say.
Then, sorry, go ahead, Mandy. Go ahead,
Oh,
Mandy.
it's not
No,
me.
no, go ahead.
It's not me.
Oh, that wasn't Mandy. Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, but what about free will? Like, I don't think that there's a part of the conversation that we're not talking about, which is free will, right? That, like, God gives us free will to make decisions.
Monday mentioned
So
choice. He mentioned that we have the choice. He mentioned that.
But I also want to mention, I think at the end of the
let me
day,
finish my point.
I know
It's okay. I can finish.
the guns have been coming at Lois and I because and it's not, I believe in God. Do I believe in God 100%? I'm still searching some truth. I did grow up believing the Bible 100%. Am I believing the Bible 100% now? No. And I'm searching my truth, and I will continue to do so. But the part that I think we keep on forgetting, and Pastor D talks about it, pretty much everybody talks about it except for Lois and I, is it's based on your faith, and none of it is factual. It is based on your faith. Pastor D talk about God doesn't want us to do this. When do you know, or have you talked to God? It is based on your faith. And as long as it's based on your faith, this argument can last until infinity. That's also the reason why a lot of people decide not to talk about religion or things like that, because it is hard when you're discussing something that is based on on somebody's faith, because there's no way to have any fact. There's no way to reproduce anything.
Pat,
And because there's no way to
you're
reproduce
talking
anything,
from a scientific perspective, and I understand that.
I'm not talking from a scientific perspective. I'm talking from a human being who is trying to scholarly understand what is going on, not necessarily from a scientific
when it
perspective.
comes to God, it's not a scholarly understanding that is required. It's a heart and a head knowledge.
Yeah, but you're a pastor. You can tell me that.
Hold on a second.
You can tell that because you're a pastor.
Hold on a second. You're a scientist, right? You also have your own protocol in order for you to do the work that you do. And you follow that protocol. Why is it any different for someone who follows the same protocol and the Bible? It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
I get that it's the same thing, but what you cannot do, what you cannot do is you cannot impose that on me.
No. Listen. Let me just say this. At any given time when we do this show, and those who are watching, and I say this before, what we are trying to do is not to tell you what to think. What we are trying to do is encourage you to study and research and come up with your own conclusion. But what we are saying is this is who we are. This is what we believe. This is the reason why we believe it. The Bible again say, come, let us reason together. If you're having problems with it, the Bible itself gives you the welcome to come. Come to him, not to me, not to the remedy, but to him, to God himself. I think the problem is sometimes we will rather go to science by itself. We will rather go to philosophy. We will rather go to all of those things, but to God. What I'm trying to say is it's not enough to do all of those things. You can do all of those things, but you have to give equal right to the Bible the same way you give equal right to the book that you call a historical book. Because I was not around when George Washington was here. I only know about George Washington because of what was written about George Washington, right?
Right.
And so we use history. This is not the first time we're doing this.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, why is it so different when it's the Bible? Because now all of a sudden we can't measure it. Well, I can't measure what George Washington did right now. I can't. But there is something called an experience. You and I can experience things. Many Christians before us and people will come after us will have an experience with God. God doesn't just talk to us through the Bible. He doesn't just talk to us through science. He also talks to us through our experience with him. And I said this before, and it's okay. If some people don't believe, it's okay. But there will be those who will believe as a result of putting together the knowledge that they have in science, the knowledge that they have from the Bible, and their own experience when it comes to dealing with God. That's what I'm saying.
Can we? I kind of forgot the show. The last question that we had, I felt like we went on a little bit.
Answering difficult questions.
Just like, what was the last? Maybe bringing it back to the original or the final question that you had, Mondi, which I don't even remember at this point. Sorry.
That's all right. Well, the last point we were discussing had to do with anger, how we dealt with anger, but then we started talking about God and His anger. What does that mean when God is angry? And some people mention when God is angry, He can do whatever. He kills people, and then and I'm saying God does not have an anger issue. Okay, he doesn't have an anger issue. So, question. Because of the length of the show, it's 151. I want to respect you guys. We're gonna end here. We're gonna pray. I love you guys. It was awesome to agree and disagree. We will save some of those questions that we have for next time. Okay, we can always come back and discuss together some of those questions. So if you don't mind, I want to thank you guys again for being with us on the remedy today. But let's pray before we leave. Father God, we say a lot today, and at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. What really matters is how is our relationship with you. There are some of us who are still dealing, we are still struggling, whether or not you are will or not will, whether to believe or not believe. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, you yourself came to us and you gave us the invitation to come to you and let us reason together. So I just pray, Father God, for those who are watching on Facebook and on YouTube, that they might have the opportunity to come before you and present their questions to you personally, things that we don't understand about you. May we ask you these questions and may you open our eyes, open our minds, and open our hearts so we can have a deeper understanding of who you are. We thank you, we praise you, we honor you, and we thank you for another day. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Family, I thank you so much, and we'll see each other next time. God bless you all. Au revoir.